Hello, and welcome to Al Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist.
I'm Dr. Leviathan.
And I'm Mikey. The E stands for evil.
And we're here to discuss those internet stories most creepy and most pasta. Tonight we have...
SCP-001 is an 05's tale.
So for those of you not in the know, creepypastas are short internet stories that get copied and pasted across the internet, whether it be on Wikipedia pages, forum threads, Reddit No Sleep, or the SCP, which are essentially the Men in Black for creepypastas. Or, like, the warehouse that the Ark of the Covenant's kept in, except for creepypasta items. And occasionally, like, most of the time, it's just entries, like almost like a bestiary or a monster manual of entries. However, there are stories here and there tied to different entries. And the one we're doing is SCP-001. And this story is by TheDuckman on the SCP Foundation site. It can also be read by, or it can also be listened to by the reader on YouTube, The Haunted Reader. So, firstly, just to be clear, from the sounds of it, this isn't canon to SCP because, quite frankly, canonicity in the SCP Foundation doesn't really exist because it's a communal. It has a communal nature, like just a community of amateur writers or just writers on the internet that want to write weird stories and about weird items and weird things, and sometimes horror stuff. Also, as a reference note, SCP-001, the entry, being the first entry, is so bad, in quotes, or secret, that the actual entry itself is just a big old classified thing, except if you continue further down the entry, which is like just blank page, except for the very bottom, there's a mimetic kill agent image to stop people from looking any further. It's basically just a fractal image and it's going off the whole like mimetic virus thing. Like if you see it, your brain gets all fuckled.
Fuckled.
That's a word, brain fuckled.
Brain fuckled.
Yeah. It's a word I've heard online multiple times. It's kind of funny. So after after that fractal image, it goes into some like protocols. Like, life signs active. You're allowed to proceed. And you get to see this like listing of like proposals for what the entry or stories for what SCP-001 is. None of them are really canon. They're just kind of like a bunch of ideas that people have thrown in of what exactly it is that's classified. And this story is among them, under the factory. And we'll get into why that is in the rundown. So, as it begins, it appears to be a one-sided conversation of an individual linked to SCP-001 or deemed a part of it, talking to a researcher who has dug too deep into SCP-001 and is now being told the origin of it and the SCP Foundation itself. In 1835, somewhere in America, an industrialist and possibly satanic worshipper built a huge factory, like a mile across and 3 stories high, with a tower much taller, in which he lived, near its gates. It was a place where the employees worked and lived, completely self-sufficient, and the industrialist's name was Anderson.
James Anderson.
James Anderson, yes. Mr. Anderson. However, while the goods, almost all of them, or like all manner of them, are produced and shipped out, were high quality, the employees were in a veritable hellscape within the confines of the factory. Like, it was horrible, like living conditions and really sadistic security guards and stuff like that. Possible experimentation and yada yada. At some point around 18...
Sounds like my kind of place.
Yeah. It sounds like Walmart. Oh. At some point around 1875, a single person escaped and was able to tell the president of the horrors. So the president sent out a team of 150 men and women, led by our narrator, who went in and basically just cleaned house. They lost a few dozen people, and indeed found strange wonders and horrors within the factory. They got Anderson, and after hanging him from his entrails for 24 hours, they drew and quartered him, and then finally burned him. All the while, he laughed and said blasphemous things. Weeks passed, more people lost, and a pile of bizarre and amazing things were recovered from the factory. Basically SCP items. Or this factory was essentially pumping out SCP items. They had a meeting of the head officers on what to do with the factory and its items. And some saw them as being from God. Others saw dollar bills. Another wanted to destroy it all. One wanted to report back to the president, and some, including our narrator, wanted to contain it and use it against other things out there, like other strange things. Basically, the officers went their separate ways after that because they couldn't find any common ground. The narrator and his group founded the Foundation. They used the factory as a base of operations, a prison, a testing site, because a bunch of them started doing test work on the actual items, utilizing D class even back then, which the D stands for disposable. In 1911 is where things kind of changed. Like, they were doing pretty good up until that point. Like, they had some income from blackmailing and secrets that they knew, and other funds. And they were kind of just they were making a name for themselves. But in 1911, the Foundation discovered a race of strange things that they named the fairies based on their similarities to folklore. They hunted them, but the fairies attacked the factory en masse, slaughtering everyone but the narrator, who ran deeper into the factory. It was here, being chased by the creatures, he found a room with the remains of Anderson, still alive, and the room lit red, giving off a calming feeling and strange heartbeat, gave him a deal, essentially. So he took this deal in exchange and to change the course of events that had just happened, and in exchange for offerings of people. Also stating that every time one of the products was used that was made by the factory would give energy to the factory. Cryptic message, basically. The deal was struck. Time reversed to just before the attack, and the Foundation found itself with weapons now that could defeat the entire fairy race. So they pretty much wiped out the entire race of fairies. After that, they moved the Foundation away from the factory and closed it down, occasionally giving it the bodies of the D-class subjects from other test sites, basically, again, when a D-class dies in a report from another entry, they take the body and just dump it in the factory, and it just disappears. As well as sending in, the narrator would occasionally send teams in to inspect the factory, and they'd find it completely empty, except there was always items kind of popping out somewhere else. So, narrator is unsure where the energy that the Anderson remains spoke of is going to, and quite frankly, he doesn't want to know. The reason he's telling the researcher all this, who we kind of find out is Everett, who I believe is somebody from other stories, or from, is a known, researcher in SCP. He's telling him, Everett, this, because, just in case the narrator dies, because apparently the narrator is physically young, but his mind is old and worn from the century and a half of existing. Somebody needs to still be around to continue offering food to the factory. And maybe, who knows, this researcher might be able to stand up to the factory. But the narrator kind of doubts it. And that's where the story kind of ends. So, my thoughts on this one, this is a bit more horror-inclined than the last one we did, which was Lord Blackwood, the slug one. Yep. But it still maintains this weird fiction feel and, pulp adventure kind of vibe of the world of SCP, or at least the history of the Foundation, how, in, the global history of the world that the SCP kind of occupies. And again, it like reading this one, it really kind of I found myself reading this and just thinking it's like this would be amazing game fodder. I could like, or at least I could like pull ideas from this like for something. But yeah, I enjoyed the style of writing. I was a little concerned about the style of it and like what it was trying to do, like the purpose of it, like being like an origin story essentially for the SCP Foundation. But it kind of grew on me as I kept reading. Like I just kind of got immersed in the idea in this weird kind of horror but wacky like world that the writer has built for the SCP Foundation's history. Yeah, it's a neat little story that tries to give an origin to the Foundation and explain an otherwise creative blank space of an entry. And it lends itself to for the reader, at least for me, for my imagination to just kind of like go wild while not being super vague about certain things. Like it's pretty it's got an ambiguity to it, but it's almost like for me it was almost the right amount of ambiguity. Like it doesn't go neither here or there. Like it doesn't do any certainties, but it still gives us information while you're reading the story. It's essentially just like there's a word for it. This is where Review Cultist just has an aneurysm as he tries to remembers a word. It's kind of like the unreliable narrator. Like he's telling us the story, but we're never really sure if any of this is actually true in terms of the story's like fiction, because it's all kind of from his perspective, or he could just be like his memory is kind of going on him and he doesn't know like certainties, but he's still giving us information to have our imagination go. I would recommend it if you're looking up pulp action adventure like horror ideas, because it is kind of like a nice little like pulp story of like or the history of this weird world that the SCP seems to occupy. So, but other than that, that's kind of my stuff about my view on it. I'm sure the other guys have more. So, Mikey, D stands for evil.
Well, I don't have much on this because essentially it's just one giant monologue. Yeah. So, to sort of criticize a character that's talking about something, he talks that way, and you can sort of see how the character even develops just reading it, and you can sort of see how he is. Yep. And the interesting thing about the story is that I sort of liken it to Sanctuary, the TV show, where it's although it's the evil side, because they find a factory that has creatures and artifacts of power and things like that. Yeah. And then they're like, why weren't we doing this before, but for good?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like, Sanctuary comes up. When I was reading it, I got the Ark of the Covenant warehouse, like Area 51. Yeah. Warehouse 13. Mm-hmm. Even the Friday the 13th TV show, where it was about collecting, like, odd items and storing them somewhere. Like, it's a common genre trope, I guess, like it's a common like motif in that kind of genre. But the secret, like doing like containing things like in this weird, bizarre like base of operations, but for good.
Yeah, and it's essentially for the most part world building. Yeah, is the majority of what this is. Like, sure, there's creepy elements to it, like the guy that doesn't want to die, even with hanging from his entrails.
He just will not die. Quartered and hacked, like drawn and quartered and burned alive. Like he's getting up there on like the rank of Rasputin. what happened to him?
And it sort of stays true to the SCP in that when you go back to Lord Blackwood, it's like they take care of odd creatures. Yeah. So this is sort of the origin world building for that. Yeah. Which makes sense.
Yeah, and it definitely feels like, honestly, like, again, reading that, like, this is the second one we've done on the show, like, the second, like, full story that we've done on the show for the SCP. And it feels, like, based on just the two of them, they both feel like they're in the same universe. Like, Blackwood fits perfectly, like, and his dragon hunting, like, against the Kaiser feels like it should be in the same universe as this, like, kind of like Civil War era, like mad industrialist dude. Also, another thing, sorry, just to kind of mention as well, I did looking up the comments on this one, because there's actually they have discussion things at the bottom. I did notice that, like, yeah, there's a couple of names that are dropped, like, during the, like, the employees or the officers that are apparently in the... There is no canon to SCP, but it's, like, in the fiction that is written. Yeah. Like, there were a lot of nods, apparently, in this one, to other characters from other stories that are have been written about the SCP, so... Yeah, it was a nice... on top of being an origin, it kind of it incorporates the origin of with other stories.
Well, that's nice to do, even if the stories aren't connected by author.
Yeah, exactly.
So it maintains some continuity.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, like the I don't think any continuity, like the continuity, doesn't really get ruined with with this one, because he's telling us the story, but like how much of it is true, how much of it's like he does like it's like I don't know if like this may not be really like exactly accurate, but this is how I saw it or something like that, or this is how I could remember it.
Yeah. And don't tell anyone else what you've read or heard here. It's like, but it's online.
Yeah, it's well, yeah, because it's not we're not reading a journal. We're reading a story about an encounter. With the creature. Yeah.
So that pretty much sums up what I had.
Wow. All right, Dr. Leviathan.
Well, like Mr. E, the E stands for evil, said, like, you can't really attack the writing, pardon me, but I do kind of have a problem with at least one of the events that takes place in this big old monologue.
Yeah, okay.
The brave soul who manages to escape manages to talk to the president?
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't alive back then. I'm not even an American, so I just feel like you wouldn't get to talk to the president.
Realistically, no.
You know, like, you would get to talk to a lot of people who, in a chain, would eventually talk to the president.
Yeah.
But that's me. That's my assumption on that. Because it just kind of, again, it's the simple little plot holes that can be thrown into, you know, a creepypasta or one of these SCP reports that kind of starts to have the whole thing fall apart around it. And just, I don't know. I also don't know about entrails supporting the weight of a human body.
Yeah. I mean, it could be just like chalked up to dude's kind of weird, but being hanged by your entrails. Also, they had to cut him down. They didn't just tear like
he has immortal entrails that support him.
He's got entrails of steel.
And yeah, it's just, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a weird way to kill him with his own entrails.
Yeah, I thought that was a little extreme. Like, I mean, I understand, like, they just fought through
I can see them hanging him.
Yeah, but
and I can see them hanging him from his tower. But not,
why the entrails?
Well, because, first off, you're disemboweling him first.
Yeah.
And that's never brought up.
Yeah.
They just, you know, we hung him with his own entrails. How'd you get his fucking entrails? Oh, he keeps them in a box on his desk.
Yeah, no, to
and I mean, don't get me wrong, that would have fit.
Yeah.
That would have
We had a box of entrails, so we just used those. Yeah, I mean, like, and also, like, it kind of, like, breaks character a little bit for the people that, I mean, I know they just fought through, again, a gauntlet of hell. Like, they went up against, like, weird experiments and stuff to get to Anderson. But really, like, as soon as they find him, they don't just, like, oh, we just killed him and then or we hanged him, or we brought him in. No, we disemboweled him, took his intestines, wrapped him around his head, threw him out the window, and just left him there for 24 hours to die. Like, that's some next level shit to do. But again, I don't, like, even with, you know, the gauntlet of hell that you just went through. Like, it seems a little like next level revenge bullshit.
It's like, we've seen some shit, but it enacted on other people.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I get that the SCP Foundation isn't necessarily the good guys. They're kind of, you know...
And this kind of is
they have their dark side as well, but... Yeah, you don't just jump to hanging people with their own entrails. Because, I mean, like... Yeah, just fucking use a sturdy rope.
Yeah. There must have been some rope in there. It's 1875.
Or chain, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's a factory.
Yeah, there's something.
Sorry, just also, with your thing about, like, yeah, the survivor getting to the president. Yeah, I read that, and I was like, okay, so we're just going full-blown pulp action. Because that's something that I'd read in a pulp movie, or I'd see in a pulp movie. Like, something I'd see in Wild Wild West, or like read in like some kind of Mr. President, this survivor of this alien thing, and then it's like we need to get a team assembled. Like it's that kind of like fiction thing. It's not something that you'd really see in reality. Again, but like you said, also like we're not from that time period. We don't know how accessible the president was in that period. I mean, what happened to Lincoln? And also we're not American, so maybe I don't know.
And it could probably easily be fixed by he got word to the president as to
that would have that would have fixed it.
Or the president caught wind of, and
yeah.
But yeah, other than that, there really isn't much. I mean, I'm also a little fuzzy on how the factory, because okay, the guy gives it D class.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. But yeah, it's just. Oh wait, where is it? Yeah. Okay. So he also sometimes has to give it researchers and agents.
Mm-hmm. Not just the D
But it
class.
reaches out and takes them.
Like, I just figured, like, they walk in and then suddenly they vanish. Or they're just grabbed. Or, like, not grabbed, like, physically, but they just, like, they wander down a corridor and then, like, somebody goes by that corridor and they're not there.
Well,
it's
he does send
kind of a weird
teams
place
to check it out every once in a while.
Yeah.
So...
They're not getting taken either. Like, they're reporting back.
The ending kind of feels a little sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
Is really... The gripe I'm trying to get to with that is that, like, you're trying to wrap it up in a nice, neat little package, but you're raising questions you're raising questions at a time where you should be answering questions, or just don't bring up questions.
Yeah.
Because you're ending. If you're bringing up more questions, then you need more answers. Now, maybe that isn't necessarily true in this case, because it's it's an SCP thing. However, I as a reader, that's what I want. I want, like, I'm not saying it has to be wrapped up in a nice, neat little package and there can't be anything else that happens.
Yeah.
Like, but just don't start talking about it still feeding. We know it is. We've been told that already. But, just don't bring it up at this point. Don't bring up any of that.
Yeah. Make it a little bit tighter, don't add all these stray questions like that the character just mentions. And
the ending either has an extra paragraph or should have more, depending on really which way you decided to take it. Not the amount it has. Because with what's here, it's just, I don't know.
Like, it didn't feel rushed to me. But
no, it's not rushed. It's sloppy.
Yeah, it's just there's too many. There's a couple more questions asked.
It's all hanging down. This is the rest of it. It's a nice, uniform, tight little thing, and then the ending has all these dangly bits, and it's just it's kind of a letdown to me because it was going well. Like I said, there wasn't really anything to piss and moan about, but. Mm-hmm. Then the ending happened, and I was just like, oh, you kind of just started to fray there, and you didn't bother to fix it.
Yeah.
And where any rush might come from is that didn't take the time to weave all of those little dangly bits together into a nice uniform thing, and instead just left them all
hanging,
ugly and shit. Now, that's also one man's opinion, and mine is not always the most popular. But all in all, I mean, it's probably my favorite SCP Foundation entry we've had on the show, because there's an actual story here.
Yeah. Not
hints of a story like with Lord Blackwall or whatever his name was, where like we went fucking dragon. That's the one I want to read.
Yeah, I gotta go.
I don't want to read about a snail duel. I want to read about hunting dragons on Dragonback.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair,
this one is this it hints at other things.
Yeah,
but it's talking about the most interesting thing in the story.
Yeah, it's focusing on. It has a focus.
Because I mean that's how you allude to other things. You allude to other things that aren't as interesting as what you're talking about. You know, when you have something incredibly dull and boring and you start talking about fucking dragon riders.
Yeah, against apparently the Germans in World War I had a dragon platoon.
Yeah, who do you think pulled the blimps?
That's the real history of what the fuck's the famous one that went down?
Hindenburg?
The Hindenburg, yes.
Well, you know, this one, like I said, it hints at other things and it alludes to... And I also got the feeling that all of those officers, or at least the ones that were named, were important in the rest of the SCP entries. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I didn't feel... It wasn't a shitty... It was a good nod to other things that had been written before. It wasn't like... now, I haven't read them, so maybe it was a big kick in the teeth. But as someone who's read this, I wasn't like, oh, well, fuck, I want to know about the rest of them. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. They're in, they're out, boom.
Yeah. Yeah, the comments for regarding those were generally positive and not in the bad way, oh yeah, oh my god. No, it was actually oh, that's a really nice nod to that's actually ties into that could easily tie into this story about this character. But as for us, we're new people reading in these SCP stories. I didn't really know that they were I assumed maybe they might have been, but they otherwise could have just been codenames.
They're name drops that just end up being just that, name drops. I'm not feeling well, where's the rest of this story? Or I'm out of the loop because I don't know who these people are. No, I'm in the loop because I know everything I need to know about them.
Yeah.
They were there. That is all.
Yeah, he just mentions them because that would fit his character. He's remembering friends and comrades that he had, and that he's just it'd be as if your grandfather is telling you about some war heroes, old Jimmy or old that kind of stuff.
Steve Rogers.
Goddamn Rogers. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Swear to God, but that shield did not obey the laws of physics.
But yeah, it's that kind of thing. So yeah, I didn't it. They were nods without being the bad way you put in nods. They weren't. They were Easter eggs for who's read more stuff than we have.
Yeah. It added to the story for people who did know the names, but it didn't leave us floundering, being what the fuck?
Who's this Dawkins guy? Why is he such a jerk?
Who's a Tesla?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that one actually, I was wait, are you referencing the real Tesla, or? I think, yeah.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
Because even if they weren't,
they were.
Yes, they were. But yeah, in general, this is not offensive.
So, a contender for the best creepypasta of the year?
No, because
it's an SCP.
It's a good story for an SCP, but the way it ends is really what would keep it out of the running for that and the fact that we actually already have a good contender for Pasta of the Year, and that just it beats this. There aren't any problems with this, but a lack of problems does not mean greatness.
Yeah.
You know, a lack of shit doesn't make something great.
Yeah, like it's a good story. It's not a amazing story.
But it is also incredibly forgettable, because I read this 2 days ago, and you were doing the rundown. I was like, oh wait, yeah.
I had to go through it, yeah.
And like, yeah, this is completely forgettable. Not in a bad way per se, but when something is forgettable, it is not, the best of the year.
Fair enough. Yeah. Memory wise, this world was the best one, right? Is that what we're kind of saying?
I can't remember.
Wah, wah. Sorry.
It was, several weeks ago?
That's fair, yeah.
My memory is not the best.
I just wanted to bring that up because I personally couldn't, I had to keep racking my brain about that, but yeah.
I do recall it was a good story, whereas this one isn't a bad story.
Yeah.
It's a difference. And in this case, it's a big...
Yeah, for you.
Yeah.
And probably other people.
Yeah.
All right. So recommendations then. I kind of told mine right after my thoughts because it wasn't part of my thoughts. Honestly, I will recommend this one. If nothing else, if you enjoy pulpy horror, this one's a nice little story that you can it had my imagination go wild. So yeah, if you're like-minded like me, check it out.
I'm gonna recommend it as well, just because it was an interesting story at the very least, and there was not a lot of shit, as Dr. Leviathan pointed out.
Yeah, there is a substantial lack of shit in this story.
And
there's a gold nugget among this pile of shit.
No. It's a lack of shit.
It's a pocket. It's an air pocket.
It's not gold. Maybe it could be like iron, because hey, it's still useful. May not be as valuable, but there is certainly a use for it.
It gets the bronze.
And it also sort of lends itself to reading more SCP based on what we've read.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot more to this world, obviously, because there's 3,000 plus SCPs.
Yeah, well, entry-wise, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to look in more on, the Lord, because apparently there's more Lord Blackwell, more Blackwood stories, so I'm going to actually look into more of those and see. Also, apparently TheDuckman has also written other stories, so hopefully his repertoire has improved or stayed roughly the same. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I recommend it. Particularly if you've heard of the SCP things and you've been like, oh, I should read them. I think this would be a good first one.
Yeah.
Or a good early one. Mm-hmm. Especially since then later you'd be like, oh, hey, that's that guy that was talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is a lot of world building.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, if you read SCP Foundations, you should probably read this because it's good.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of information. However, I did recall one of my other problems.
Okay.
I'm just gonna read this. Every researcher who's been around for a while looks into it. Most are satisfied when they uncover the angel with the flaming sword. It's buried under enough levels. What?
Yeah.
This is one of those times where you've brought up something way more interesting than anything else brought up at this point.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to... Now, maybe there's, some other SCP-001...
Oh, there's a bunch.
But maybe there's another one that has an angel with a flaming sword.
That's true, yeah.
And
that would be a nice nod.
And it would be kind of... Yeah, I think it would be fun. Because oh, yeah, that's what one is to those people.
Yeah.
But to people who get past it, it's the factory. That's kind of a fun little thing.
Yeah. I'm going to look into it, because, again, it's a list. It's not, a couple. It's at least 10 plus like entries, and not all of them are stories. Some of them are actually like declassified versions of the main entry, but some of them there are a bunch of them that are just stories. So I'll look into them and see if there is indeed a blazing angel one, or an angel with a blazing sword.
But yeah, it was, in general, it was good.
Yeah.
Did it achieve greatness? Not to me, but sometimes on this show, being good is achieving greatness. So.
Yeah. The bar is kind of low. And like I said, like the story, like for me, like the story isn't great, but it's not great as the story as a whole, but it's great for me or for people who like really get immersed, have our imagination go wild, because I was reading this and really getting kind of actually inspired to do stuff I wanted to like take things from this and make them my own somewhere else, but with the same kind of idea. Like I like the ideas that this story is presenting. For me, that's what the greatness of the story is. Like, it's a good story narratively and some of that, but for me, it's a great inspiration pool. Yeah. So, anything else then?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Do I need more?
No.
Yes.
Oh. I must have more. Sorry. So that was this week's episode. If you like what you heard, if you didn't, leave us a comment in the comment section below, wherever this gets posted, whether it be on Kiwi6, Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr. Leave us a review or rating on iTunes. Every little bit helps. You can also send us messages on Twitter at E stands for evil, at Dr. Leviathan, or at Review Cultist. Also, you can send us emails at aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. That's aldenterigamortis@gmail.com, where you can also send us suggestions for other creepypastas you'd like us to discuss on the show, or SCP stories. And if you'd like, you can check out the title cards for each episode on YouTube with the videos, or the Tumblr site, crazonstudios.tumblr.com. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can become a patron. Go to Patreon and look up Al Dente Rigamortis and sign up for the tier of patronage you'd like to support us at. So, until next time, I have been your host, Review Cultist.
I'm still Dr. Leviathan.
And I'm Mikey. The E stands for evil.
And this has been Al Dente Rigamortis. Sleep well.
Too late. Lost forever.
These things can't be staged. You know that.
That's fair. Fuck it,
There's your bumper.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. That's the Al Dente way. Yeah, like...
This is a live recording.
in front of a live studio audience. That's a lie. Well, that's only half a lie, because sometimes we do have somebody that's just sitting in the background listening.
Yeah, but they're not often alive.
Ooh. That's going to be all our back episode, our back thing. Whatever we call it. What the fuck am I... Okay, hang on a second, sorry.
This level of professionalism people have come to expect from Al Dente.
Hey, I have one word for you. Editing.